Screenless. Hello and welcome to another episode of Creative Cuppa, where in each episode I chat with someone working in the many creative industries. I'm Gareth Davies, a composer for TV and an audio producer, and I have just come out of self-isolation after going through COVID. Yep, after a year and a half of avoiding this horrible beast of a virus, and I consider myself to be fairly cautious, I tested positive a couple of weeks ago. Personally, I think my first jab stopped it from being worse, and I can assure you that it wasn't very nice. I also feel pretty lucky that I work from home, well, my garden anyway, and I'm very aware that in the scheme of things, I've been really lucky. So my advice is to get your jabs and just be courteous towards other people, whether they're wearing a mask or not. In fact, it shouldn't take something like COVID for us to be courteous, should it? Now, back to it. Today's guest, Reyna, has had a fascinating journey into creativity. One legal career, a dip into creative writing, and then drawing on her experiences from her previous career to start her new one. I won't say too much. I'll let Reyna explain. If you have a cuppa ready then, here we go. Reyna Marder Gentin, novelist. Welcome to Creative Cuppa.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Where in the world are you, Reyna?
I'm in New York. I'm about half an hour north of New York City.
Oh, fantastic. And 2021. We've all been through a bit of a strange time, haven't we? How's 2021 going for you so far?
It's going okay. I'm working and I'm writing books, and that's not, that's okay during the pandemic. Thankfully, it's been quiet here. We've been healthy. It's definitely a different situation when you have your family home and everybody trying to do their own thing. But it's been okay.
Some of my creative friends have actually really struggled to be creative through the lockdowns and things.
It is hard having everybody around, to be honest.
Yeah.
If you're used to working alone and working in the quiet, and that's kind of gone. But it's coming back. So.
Yeah. Now, we have something in common because I was 38 years old when I switched from being a school teacher to a professional composer.
Wow.
And you've changed careers fairly dramatically too.
I did.
What prompted that move, and has it been what you expected?
Sure. So I was an attorney for many, many years, and I was doing criminal defense work, appellate work. And I loved it. It was a great job, and it was a great way to work and still raise a family. But it was very challenging, as I'm sure you can imagine. These were all people that had been convicted of felony offenses in the state of New York. So everything from murder to robbery, drug dealing, burglary, rape, everything you can imagine. And trying to come up with something for them each time was difficult. It was a public defender's office, so there was no picking and choosing your clients. You were assigned to somebody and you had to find something to say on their behalf. And, often there were very critical legal issues to be raised, but other times you were really scrounging, to be honest. And as I say, it was challenging, it was fulfilling, but, I did it for almost 23 years. And after a while, it was just hard to tell those stories. And I kind of decided that I would leave that job. I didn't really know what I was going to do next. I didn't have, a particular goal, but I was used to telling stories. And I kind of thought that maybe there was a way to tell those kinds of stories with a more, I don't want to say more complicated. They're not more complicated. It's just that I could make up the things that I didn't know. When I was representing defendants, I knew a lot about what had happened at the time of the crime. And I knew maybe a little bit of what happened before and a little bit about what happened after, but I was missing huge portions of the life of the person that did whatever they did. And through fiction, I'm able to fill in those gaps that I couldn't ever get to as an attorney. And it's been great.
So constructing a novel and constructing a case, I mean, are there comparisons you can draw there where you're really looking at the detail and looking at the narrative
Yeah,
over.
in some ways, I think it's really quite similar. You want to have a character arc, right? You want to know what happened to the person when they were a child and when they were growing up and when they had their first love, and was there a teacher that made an impact on them or a teacher that could have made an impact on them? And, you kind of want to know, how did they get to this moment when they did the thing that is inexplicable? Because in some level there is an explanation. You may not accept it and it may not be a good explanation, but they didn't arrive at that moment, in a vacuum. And that's very much the case in a novel. If you have somebody acting in a way that just does not make any sense given what they've been through before, what the reader knows about them and what the reader has come to expect, it's just not going to fly. And in fiction, it gives you a way to kind of come up with those things and make sense of things that maybe otherwise you can't really make sense of in real life. And it gives you a perspective, I think.
Yeah. So what's your writing process like? Do you draw on your own experiences from those days?
So I definitely do. I think people's debut novel, at least from what I can tell from reading a lot of debut novels, often draws heavily on their personal experience. And certainly mine was about a young public defender who's kind of lost her mojo after representing these kinds of people for a while. And then she gets assigned to somebody she thinks may be innocent. And that kind of perks her up again. And of course, it doesn't help that he's, also a little bit of a sociopath and handsome and, charming. And she kind of falls that way a little bit also. That was not actually drawn from my experience. But I could see how that could happen. So definitely I had a lot of kind of my own experiences in that first book. Since then, I think I've evolved a little bit. My second book was actually for children, and it's about a dyslexic girl in the 8th grade who doesn't actually know she has dyslexia. She just knows that she's not hitting her potential. And that was really kind of came much more from my imagination. I've never experienced that particular challenge, nor have my kids. But, I think when you start to write more, you start to realize that you know more than you think you know. Like if your first book has to be about the people that you know and the experiences you had, moving on from there, you can write about all sorts of things because you realize that you can get to them from within. You can reach back to your experiences as a 14-year-old, and it doesn't have to be that experience of having a learning difference. It can be some other experience that, particularly impacted you at that age. And if you can write in a way that's relatable to people, you can write about all sorts of emotions and all sorts of, challenges that you didn't yourself experience. And then my third book, I did return to the law. It's not about me. It's about a family court judge. But I did practice in family court, both at the beginning of my career and now as a volunteer. And I did draw on quite a number of those experiences and coming up with the cases that she sees in court and the ones that affect her personally.
Fantastic. So what would a typical day look like for you? Are you an early bird? Do you prefer after lunch? Or, what's a typical day?
I'm definitely an early bird. I get up usually around 6:30 in the morning. I try to get going. Now the house is quiet again. Thank goodness. I miss the kids, but everyone's gone back to their regular scheduled life now. So it's pretty quiet here. And, since I'm not working and my volunteer gig actually kind of closed down during COVID, so I'm waiting for that to reopen. I work in the court system as a volunteer, and the courts here are still largely closed. I often have my day free, and I try to work, kind of intermittently throughout the day. I kind of intersperse it with other things I want to do. I go exercise, I go take a walk, I go buy the groceries for dinner. But, if I have a day free, I'm really excited and I can sit down and really try to get a lot done. So
We've spoken about on this podcast before about even though you might be doing other things, the brain's still going, isn't it? So
sure.
you might be doing shopping, but actually that could be an hallelujah moment in your mind.
For sure. And
that's what that character's doing.
Right. The funny thing for me is I observe the Jewish Sabbath. And so on Saturdays, I don't write or use any electricity. And because it's so quiet in the rest of my life, that's when most of my ideas come to me is on Saturdays. And that's actually, it's a beautiful thing, but it's also like very difficult in some ways because I can't write down. Like I'll think of whole dialogue, a whole conversation will play out in my head between the characters. And I often just lose it. Like Saturday night, I'm racing to my computer. What did she say to him? What did she want him to do? And often it's gone. But.
Oh, I was going to ask actually, do you prefer quiet when you're working, or do you listen to soundtracks, or
No, I'm pretty much quiet. I don't really. If I I get distracted. So
I'm very much the same. Although I compose music, so obviously there's sound. But yes, doing other things, I think peace and quiet. You've got to let your brain just focus on one thing, haven't you?
So.
But everyone's different.
That's true.
So once you've written your book, do you edit yourself? How are they published? Who promotes them? What happens?
Yeah, so I've had kind of 3 very different experiences with these 3 books. The first one, when I wrote it, it was my first try. I didn't really know what I was doing. I often take classes, workshop classes. There's a local university nearby that has a writing center for adults. Everybody there has had another career before they turn to this. They're mostly doing it, out of a love and a passion for writing, but people are not actually professional writers. The teachers there are all professional writers. And it's a wonderful place because it's not, you're not doing it for credit. You're just there with other people. Everybody's extremely supportive. So my first book, I did 2 classes with that book. I did a beginning novel workshop, and then I did an advanced novel workshop. So all the people in the class, we each read each other's full manuscript by the end of the term.
That must have been a bit nerve-wracking.
It's incredibly nerve-wracking. It's also, as you can imagine, a pretty big commitment of time. I mean, there were, I think, 8 of us in the class, and so everybody had a book that was 300 pages, and you weren't reading it like, you sit on your couch and you read the book. I mean, you're really trying to focus. Is this making sense? Is this language make sense? Did this character progress in a way that makes sense? Are the turning points in the right place? But it was fantastic. So I went through that experience actually with the advanced novel class twice. They had read it twice. And I started to send it out to try to see if I could get an agent. That's how it works here. I'm not sure how it works there. But, to be honest, getting an agent here is a very, very difficult process. I would say it is mostly better left to the youngsters, of which I was not one for sure at the time, not now either. And, it's largely, I don't want to say kids because they're adults, but who are, 25 years old. They've just come out of a Master of Fine Arts program. They have made certain connections. And this is all to the good. I mean, they have real social media presence, followers on all different platforms. And that's what the agents are looking for. They're looking for somebody who has written a great book, but also somebody who is going to have a little bit of a ready-made audience when the book gets out. And if you're not in that position, if you're somebody who's come to this later in life, if you barely know how to use Facebook, much less, Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and everything else, It's pretty hard to land an agent. So I tried for a while, and then I kind of said, you know what, this is not going to happen, and I'm getting older, not younger. So I went the route of what they call a hybrid press. I'm not, I'm not sure what's here and what's there, but a hybrid press means that you do make an investment in your own publishing, but they do everything that a regular traditional publisher would do. You have to be accepted by the publishing house, so it's a vetted process. They're not just taking anybody. And then they do the layout, they do the cover, they do the distribution. They don't do much promotion, but I don't think even many of the major publishers do much promotion these days. That's pretty much left to the author. So I went that way the first time around. I went with actually a female-owned press that only published women, which I thought was great. I mean, they're very invested in leveling the playing field a little here, which is also still very much dominated by men. And there was kind of a sisterhood around it. We had our own Facebook group. Nice. We chat with the other authors. We give each other ideas about where you can present your book. If somebody's presenting and it's half an hour from my house, I try to go. And, and that was a fantastic experience. My next 2 books, I actually did end up with small presses, places that I did not have to contribute anything financially. And, and that's a great feeling too. I mean, you kind of feel like, wow, I didn't have to put any of my money down. I didn't feel that bad about the first one either, because I felt like if I were starting a small business and I put that kind of money into it, nobody would blink an eye. Somehow with publishing, it's considered, taboo. You can't pay to be published, but I just think that's foolish.
Oh, I think you should. It's your content, isn't it? You can do whatever you want,
and it's your life. You want to get out there.
Absolutely.
So now these 2 books are with small publishers. It's been a great experience. They've been lovely to work with. The editing process has been great. The promotion, again, as I say, is really on the author. So you do have to hire a publicist, and
I think it's why certainly over here, there's a huge rise in celebrity authors. So these celebrities obviously have massive followings online. Right. So that does follow, doesn't it?
Of course. And that's tough. It's tough sometimes to see, because sometimes, you take the plunge, you buy somebody's book just to see what it's like. And you're like, this book is not, like this book would be going nowhere if it were written by me, but because it's written by X, it's, on every shelf in every bookstore and whatever. But you know what? You can't look at it that way. I mean,
No, you made it happen. You had your own route, and you've made it happen.
And I've had great interactions with people reading the books, and that's what it's all about. That's somebody writing to you and saying like, wow, I was really moved by this, or this helped me do such and such. It's a great feeling. So
absolutely brilliant. So Reyna, where can people find you and your books online if they want to seek you out?
So they can find all sorts of more information on my website, which is just reynamardergentin.com. And on there I have the things that I also publish on this, have published on the side, short stories, personal essays, and then all the information about the books. You can certainly buy the books on Amazon UK. And I think, you can certainly I don't know. I know here you can order them at any independent bookstore, and we're definitely plugging the independent bookstores. They've had a terrible time during COVID. Just all the foot traffic has been cut off, and people are not just wandering into the store and looking at books, which is sad.
Yeah.
If that's something you can do there, that would certainly be great.
Fantastic. Well, I'll put all those links in the show notes for you.
Thank you.
But for now, Reyna Marder Gentin, thanks for joining me for a cuppa.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Reyna for her time. I really like how she's been able to write her own version of events after so many years, to fill in the gaps that she couldn't get to at the time. That's what creativity is, really, isn't it? Your own version, seeing the world through your own creative filter. This episode was produced by the Sound Boutique for Screenless, so if you'd like to start a podcast yourself, go and check out what they have to offer at thesoundboutique.com/podcasts. Also, Screenless now has its very own channel on Apple Podcasts, which currently houses Creative Cuppa and Making a Soundtrack, but there are plans for more. So if you're on Apple Podcasts, check it out and see all of the Screenless podcast content in one place. And while you're there, if you could leave a positive rating and review, that would be amazing too. Thank you. That's all for now. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay kind. And until next time, thanks for joining me for a cuppa.